My family didn't choose me. They chose my brother. And the worst part is, it wasn't hidden. It happened slowly, over years, in ways that became impossible to ignore, once I was old enough to understand what was really happening. He got more patience, more attention, more forgiveness, and somehow more belief, even when he failed, even when he made mistakes, even when I was the one fixing those mistakes after everyone else walked away from them. Because in my family, effort didn't matter as much as image. And my brother had the image they loved: confident, charismatic, the kind of person who could walk into a room and immediately become the center of it. People naturally noticed him. Meanwhile, I became the opposite: quiet, reliable, the person who stayed late, handled problems, took responsibility when things went wrong. I thought that would matter eventually. I thought consistency would win over time. That if I worked hard enough, stayed loyal enough, proved myself enough, eventually they would see me differently. But they never did. Because the decision had already been made long before I realized there was even a competition. My brother was the future. I was the backup plan. And once you realize your role inside a family, you start noticing everything. The way one person gets protected while another gets criticized. The way mistakes are excused for some people, but remembered forever for others. The way success gets celebrated differently depending on who achieved it. I noticed all of it, especially after we started working together in the family business. That's when the favoritism stopped feeling emotional and started affecting real life. I worked longer hours, handled difficult clients, fixed problems nobody else wanted to deal with. While my brother showed up mostly for visible moments, meetings, presentations, big conversations where image mattered more than results. And somehow, that was enough. Because people don't always reward contribution. Sometimes they reward personality, and my family loved his. At first, I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that eventually results would speak for themselves, that one day my father would look at everything objectively and realize who was actually carrying the weight behind the scenes. But deep down, I think I already knew the truth. I just didn't want to admit it, because admitting it meant understanding something painful. This was never really about capability. It was about preference. And preference doesn't care how hard you work. Then one day, my father gathered everyone together and made the decision official. The business would belong to my brother, not shared, not discussed, decided, just like that. And I still remember the exact feeling I had sitting there listening to it. Not anger, not shock, just clarity. Because for the first time in my life, everything finally made sense. No matter how much I worked, no matter how much I sacrificed, no matter how many problems I solved, it was never going to be me. They had already chosen who mattered most. And it wasn't me. Growing up, it was never obvious at first. That's the strange thing about favoritism inside a family. From the outside, everything can look normal. No one says it directly. No one announces it. It just slowly becomes part of the structure of the house until everyone starts acting around it without even realizing it anymore. In my family, my brother was the center of everything. Not officially, but naturally. At least that's how everyone treated it. He was louder than me, more confident, better at talking to people. The kind of person who always seemed comfortable being noticed. And people loved that, especially my parents. When relatives visited, he was the one they talked about first. When something good happened, his achievement somehow sounded bigger. When he made mistakes, there was always an explanation waiting for him. He's still learning. He didn't mean it. He just needs more time. Meanwhile, I learned something very different. If I made a mistake, it stayed attached to me long enough to matter. Long enough that I became careful, quiet, calculated. Because over time, I realized something simple. In my family, being dependable was expected, but being impressive was rewarded, and my brother was impressive, at least on the surface. As we got older, that gap became more obvious, especially once we started helping with the family business. My father built it over decades. It wasn't huge, but it was stable, respected, and valuable enough that everyone understood one thing without saying it out loud. One day, someone would take over. And even before that conversation officially existed, people already acted like they knew who it would be. My brother naturally moved toward visible roles, meetings, conversations, anything involving presentation or attention. I moved toward responsibility. The work that actually kept things running. I handled difficult clients, solved operational problems, stayed late when things went wrong. If something broke unexpectedly, I was usually the one fixing it while everyone else went home. At first, I didn't mind. I told myself that results mattered more than attention, that eventually consistency would become impossible to ignore. And honestly, part of me believed my father saw it too. Sometimes he would compliment my work quietly when no one else was around. "You handled that well. Good decision." Small things like that. And those moments mattered more to me than they should have. Because I kept thinking they meant something bigger. That eventually all the work, all the sacrifices, all the responsibility I carried would lead somewhere. But every time an important moment came, my brother was always positioned in front of it. If clients visited, he greeted them. If there was an important dinner, he attended. If a major decision had to be announced publicly, somehow he was always standing next to my father while I stayed in the background handling details nobody noticed. And the frustrating part was, he wasn't useless. That would have been easier. He was smart, charismatic, naturally good at making people feel comfortable, but he lacked discipline, consistency, responsibility. Things would get ignored unless someone else cleaned them up afterward, usually me. And over time, that became our dynamic. He created the image. I carried the weight behind it. Still, I convinced myself it was temporary. That eventually reality would matter more than appearance. Until one night changed everything. We were having dinner together when my father started talking about the future of the business more seriously than usual. The room felt different immediately. And before he even finished speaking, I already knew what was coming. Then he finally said it. One day, the business would belong to my brother. Everyone reacted normally, like this was expected, like this was right. And sitting there listening to it, I realized something painful. No matter how much work I did, I was never really being considered, because the decision had already been made long ago. After that dinner, something changed. Not officially. No one announced anything new. But once the decision was spoken out loud, everyone started acting differently around it. Like the future had already been settled, and my role inside that future suddenly felt smaller. At first, it showed up in small ways. Meetings I wasn't invited to anymore. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Decisions that were already finalized by the time I heard about them. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious enough to confront, but enough to notice. And once you notice something like that, you can't unsee it. My brother started taking on more visible authority inside the business. Not necessarily more responsibility, just more control over decisions people could see. Clients were introduced to him differently. My father started using phrases like, "You'll be working with him more moving forward," or "He'll be handling things from now on." And every time I heard it, something felt off. Because I knew what actually happened behind the scenes. I knew who solved problems when deals went wrong, who stayed late fixing mistakes, who carried pressure nobody else wanted. But none of that seemed to matter anymore. Image mattered more. And my brother had the image everyone wanted to believe in. I tried to ignore it, told myself I was overthinking, that maybe this was just part of preparing him for leadership. But then one moment made everything impossible to deny. We were discussing a problem with an important client, a serious issue, one that could have cost the business a lot of money if it wasn't handled correctly. I explained exactly what needed to happen, step by step, no emotion, just logic. The room went quiet for a second. Then my brother spoke. He repeated the exact same idea I had just explained, almost word for word, and suddenly, everything changed. My father nodded immediately. "That's smart," he said. "Good thinking." Everyone agreed. The exact same solution, the exact same plan. But somehow, it sounded better coming from him. I sat there quietly, realizing something I think I had known for years but never fully accepted. It didn't matter what I said, not really, because they weren't listening to me the same way they listened to him. And once you realize that, you stop feeling overlooked. You start feeling invisible. After that meeting, I started paying attention differently, not emotionally, carefully. Because once you realize people don't value your words the same way, you stop assuming things are fair. And the more I watched, the clearer everything became. My brother wasn't leading the business. He was performing leadership. There's a difference. Real leadership shows up when things go wrong, when pressure hits, when decisions have consequences. That's where people reveal who they really are. And my brother avoided those moments whenever he could. He loved visibility, not responsibility. If something succeeded, he wanted credit immediately. But when something failed, I was usually the one fixing it afterward. At first, I kept doing it, out of habit, out of loyalty. Because despite everything, part of me still cared about protecting the business, protecting what my father built. But slowly, that loyalty started turning into resentment. Not because I wanted recognition, but because I realized something worse. They expected it from me, like my effort was automatic, like my sacrifice didn't count because it was already part of who I was. Then things got worse. My brother started making bigger decisions without understanding the consequences behind them. Expensive decisions, risky ones, the kind that sounded impressive in meetings but created problems later. And every time, I saw the problems coming first. I pointed them out calmly, logically, but it never mattered. Because the moment my brother disagreed with me, the conversation ended. My father always backed him. Always. Even when the numbers supported me, even when reality supported me, it didn't matter. Because the decision had already been made. They didn't want the most reliable person leading the future. They wanted the person they believed in emotionally. One night, after another argument, my father looked directly at me and said something I never forgot. "You think too small." That's when I realized something painful. To them, caution looked weak. Meanwhile, confidence, even reckless confidence, looked like leadership. And my brother knew how to sell confidence better than anyone. The breaking point came slowly, then all at once. By that stage, my brother had already started acting like the business belonged to him, even before anything was officially transferred. He made decisions without asking, changed processes he didn't fully understand, spent money trying to make the company look bigger instead of making it stronger. And every time something went wrong, someone else had to deal with the damage. Usually me. One afternoon, we lost an important client, not because of the market, not because of competition, because my brother promised something we couldn't deliver. I knew it would fail the moment he made the deal. I warned him privately before anything was finalized. I explained the risks, the timeline, the numbers, but he ignored all of it, because confidence mattered more to him than reality. And when the client pulled out, everything exploded. The office became tense immediately. Money had already been spent preparing for the project. And somehow, the conversation turned toward me. Questions about why nobody stopped the problem earlier, as if I hadn't already tried. Then my brother finally said it. "If you knew it was a problem, why didn't you stop it?" That sentence stunned me. Not because it was unfair, because everyone else stayed quiet after he said it. No one defended me, not even my father. And in that moment, I realized something dangerous. They didn't just favor my brother, they protected him, even when he was wrong, even when everyone knew he was wrong. I looked at my father, waiting for him to say something. Anything. Instead, he just sighed and said, "We need solutions right now, not arguments." And somehow, that became the end of it. That was the moment something changed inside me. Not anger, distance. Because for the first time, I stopped feeling like part of the family. I started feeling like someone they only needed when things went wrong. A few weeks later, my father made it official. Not privately, not respectfully, in front of everyone. Managers, staff, people who had watched me work for years. He stood there and announced that my brother would officially take over leadership of the company moving forward. Just like that. No discussion. No acknowledgement of everything I had done. It was like my role in the business had been erased overnight. Everyone clapped, congratulated him, shook his hand, and I just stood there, trying to process how someone can spend years helping build something and still be treated like they were never truly part of it. Then my father looked at me and said, "You'll support him during the transition." Support him. That word stayed in my head longer than it should have, because that's all I had ever been. Support. Never the priority, never the future. Just the person expected to carry weight quietly while someone else received the title. And somehow, everyone acted like that was normal. My brother smiled like he had earned it, like leadership had naturally belonged to him all along. Meanwhile, I knew the truth. I knew how many problems were hidden behind the image everyone loved so much. But none of it mattered anymore. The decision had already been made. And for the first time in my life, I stopped trying to earn my place. Because you can't earn something that was never available to you in the first place. That night, I went home, packed a bag, and left. No argument, no dramatic speech, just silence. Because deep down, I finally understood something painful. No matter how much value I brought into that family, I was never the person they truly chose. Leaving felt strange, not dramatic, not freeing, just quiet. I drove for a while that night, without really knowing where I was going. My phone stayed silent the entire time. No calls, no messages, no one asking where I went or telling me to come back. And honestly, that hurt more than the conversation itself, because it confirmed something I had spent years trying not to believe. They were comfortable letting me go, not because I failed, but because I was never the person they truly built the future around. For the first few weeks, I tried not to think too far ahead. I focused on surviving the day in front of me. Small apartment, cheap furniture, basic routines. Everything felt smaller than the life I had before, but strangely, it also felt lighter. For the first time in years, I woke up without carrying someone else's expectations. No fixing my brother's mistakes. No trying to prove my value inside a system that had already decided my position. Just me, and whatever came next. At first, that felt terrifying. Then slowly, it started feeling honest. I picked up whatever work I could find. Consulting, small operational projects, helping local businesses solve problems most people ignored. Nothing impressive, nothing glamorous. But people noticed something quickly. I was reliable. If I said I would do something, it got done. If there was a problem, I solved it. No excuses, no performance, just results. And for the first time, those results directly benefited me. Not my brother, not the family business, me. That shift changed something inside my head. Because before, no matter how hard I worked, ownership always belonged to someone else emotionally. Now even small wins felt different. They were mine, completely. I started sleeping better, thinking more clearly. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because the pressure was finally honest. There's a strange peace that comes when your problems actually belong to you. No politics, no favoritism, no invisible competition you were never allowed to win. Just effort and outcome. And slowly, things started improving. One client became two became five. Then referrals started happening naturally. People trusted me because I solved problems without needing attention for it. Ironically, the exact thing my family overlooked became the reason strangers valued me. Consistency, discipline, responsibility. The things that looked boring inside my family suddenly became valuable in the real world. And that realization stayed with me. Because for years, I thought something was wrong with me. That maybe I lacked whatever quality made people choose my brother over me. But once I stepped outside that environment, I started seeing things differently. The problem wasn't that I lacked value. The problem was that I kept trying to prove my value to people who had already decided how they wanted to see me. And no amount of effort changes that. That realization hurt, but it also freed me. Because once I stopped chasing approval, all that energy finally had somewhere else to go. Into myself, into my work, into building something that actually belonged to me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't working to be chosen anymore. I was building my own future instead. At the beginning, I wasn't trying to build anything big. I was just trying to stay stable. That was the difference. Back at the family business, everything always felt tied to image. Growth had to look impressive. Decisions had to sound ambitious. My brother loved that part of it. But after leaving, I stopped caring about appearances completely. I focused on things that worked. Simple as that. If something brought results consistently, I repeated it. If something wasted time, I removed it. No emotion, no ego. And slowly, that mindset started creating momentum. The small consulting jobs turned into long-term clients. Those clients started recommending me to other people. Business owners talked to each other more than I realized, and my name started circulating quietly through referrals. Not because I marketed myself aggressively, because I solved problems, reliably. That became my reputation. And reputation compounds faster than people think, especially when most people overpromise and underdeliver. I did the opposite. I underpromised, then delivered more than expected, every single time. That alone separated me from most people in the industry. Within a year, I wasn't chasing work anymore. Work was coming to me, not endless amounts of it, but enough to notice something important. I finally had leverage. For the first time in my life, I could choose which opportunities made sense and which ones didn't. That feeling changed me more than the money did, because choice creates confidence, and confidence built through experience feels very different from confidence built through attention. My brother always had the second type. I was finally building the first. Around that time, I started hearing small updates about the family business through mutual connections. Nothing dramatic at first, just comments. Things feel different over there now. They're expanding really fast. Your brother's making big moves. And every time I heard something like that, I felt the same reaction, not jealousy, concern, because I knew exactly how he operated. Big decisions, fast growth, high visibility, very little structure underneath it. And deep down, I already knew how that story usually ends. The difference between my business and my brother's business wasn't intelligence. It was discipline. That's what most people misunderstand about growth. Big ideas are easy. Fast expansion is easy. Looking successful is easy. What's difficult is building something stable enough to survive pressure. And pressure eventually shows up in every business. I understood that now. So, while my brother chased visibility, I focused on structure, systems, processes, predictability. I started documenting everything, creating workflows, building routines that removed unnecessary mistakes. It wasn't exciting work, but it mattered, because the goal wasn't to look successful. The goal was to become difficult to break. That mindset changed everything. I hired slowly, carefully, not based on personality, based on reliability. I'd already seen what happens when people confuse charisma with competence. I wasn't making that mistake again. At first, managing other people felt uncomfortable. Letting go of control always does when you're used to carrying everything yourself. Mistakes happened. Things weren't always done the way I wanted. But instead of reacting emotionally, I adjusted the system around the problem. And over time, things became smoother, faster, more scalable. For the first time, money stopped depending entirely on my personal time. Work continued moving, even when I stepped away briefly. That changed how I thought about growth completely. Because now I wasn't just working inside the business. I was building something that could operate beyond me. And once that happened, the numbers changed fast. Revenue increased, clients stayed longer, referrals multiplied, everything became more predictable. Meanwhile, updates about the family business started sounding worse. Not publicly, not officially, but quietly. Late payments, high employee turnover, clients leaving unexpectedly. At first, I tried not to pay attention. It wasn't my problem anymore, but part of me still understood exactly what was happening. My brother kept expanding outward while the foundation underneath him weakened. And eventually, every unstable structure reaches the same point. The moment where appearance stops being enough to hold it together. By the second year, everything felt different, not just financially, Mentally, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was operating. That's a completely different mindset. Before, every decision came from pressure. Fear of losing momentum, fear of failing, fear of ending up back where I started. Now, decisions came from clarity. I understood my business deeply enough to predict outcomes before they happened. I knew where growth was coming from, where problems could appear, and which opportunities were actually worth pursuing. That level of control changes you. You stop reacting emotionally. You stop chasing every opportunity just because it looks impressive. Instead, you start thinking long-term, and long-term thinking creates real power. I expanded carefully. Not fast enough to attract attention, but consistently enough that the results became impossible to ignore. Larger clients started reaching out. Partnership offers appeared. People who would have ignored me years earlier suddenly wanted meetings. Not because I changed overnight, because results create credibility faster than personality ever can. And for the first time in my life, people listened to me before I spoke. That was new, not because I demanded respect, because my work already earned it. Meanwhile, I kept hearing more about my brother. Expensive mistakes, aggressive expansion, bad hires. At one point, I heard they opened a second location, mostly because my brother wanted the company to look bigger. That sentence alone told me everything. Because businesses don't collapse all at once. They collapse from decisions made for appearance instead of reality. And my brother had spent his entire life being rewarded for appearance. No one ever forced him to become disciplined. No one ever forced him to deal with consequences fully. Someone else always absorbed the damage, usually me. But I wasn't there anymore, and without someone quietly fixing problems behind the scenes, those problems started stacking on top of each other, faster and faster, until eventually, even people outside the business started noticing something was wrong. At some point, I stopped thinking about success emotionally. It became structural. That was the real shift. I wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong anymore. Not my father, not my brother, not the people who overlooked me for years. Because the truth is, once your life becomes stable, peaceful, and fully yours, validation loses value. And for the first time in my life, I had that. Control, real control, not temporary approval, not borrowed authority. Everything I built now existed because of my decisions, my systems, my discipline. If something succeeded, I understood why. If something failed, I fixed it directly. No politics, no favoritism, no carrying someone else while they took credit for the outcome. And that changed how I saw myself. I stopped viewing my quiet personality as weakness. Stopped seeing discipline as something less impressive. Because in the real world, consistency outlasts charisma almost every time, especially when pressure appears. And pressure was appearing everywhere around my brother now. More clients leaving, more financial strain, more rumors spreading through the industry. At one point, someone asked me privately if I thought the family business was going to survive. That question stayed in my head for a long time. Because years earlier, hearing something like that would have hurt me deeply. Now, it just felt distant, not because I hated them, because emotionally, I had already left that world behind. I had my own company now, my own team, my own future. And for the first time, people weren't comparing me to my brother anymore. They were comparing others to me. That realization felt strange, not satisfying, not dramatic, just quiet. like finally arriving somewhere after walking in the wrong direction for most of your life. Then one evening, I got a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Short, simple. We need to talk. No details, no explanation. But somehow, I already knew what it meant, because businesses can survive bad decisions for a while. Families can survive favoritism for a while. But eventually, reality catches up to both. Success felt quieter than I expected. For years, I imagined that if I ever made it, it would feel dramatic, like some huge emotional moment where everything suddenly made sense. But it didn't happen like that. There wasn't one breakthrough, one giant deal, one perfect moment. It happened slowly, then all at once. One day I looked around and realized my entire life had changed. Not just financially, structurally. I woke up in a place I owned, worked with people I personally chose, built systems that operated without constant chaos. My schedule belonged to me. My decisions belonged to me. That mattered more than money ever did. Because for most of my life, control always belonged to someone else. Now it didn't. And that changed how I moved through the world. I stopped chasing opportunities. I started evaluating them. That's a completely different mindset. When people spend years trying to prove themselves, they say yes to everything. Every meeting feels important. Every opportunity feels rare. But once you build something real, scarcity disappears. You stop needing validation from every room you walk into. And strangely, that's when people start respecting you the most. By then, my company had become known in the industry. Not because we were loud, not because we marketed aggressively, but because we were consistent, reliable, stable. The exact qualities people underestimate until pressure shows up. Clients trusted us because we solved problems without creating drama around them. Employees stayed because systems actually worked. Partners respected us because our growth made sense financially, not emotionally. Meanwhile, I kept hearing updates about the family business. None of them good. Late payments, lost clients, high turnover, aggressive expansion that created more pressure instead of more profit. And every time I heard something new, I understood exactly why it was happening. My brother still approached business the same way he always had, from the outside in. Focus on appearance first, reality later. That works for a while, until pressure arrives. And pressure had finally arrived. The strange part was, I didn't feel angry anymore. Years earlier, hearing about their struggles would have affected me emotionally. I would have wanted to fix it, save it, protect what my father built. But now, it felt distant. Not because I hated them, because emotionally, I had already built a life separate from them. I had my own team now, people who trusted me because I earned it, not because we shared the same last name. And for the first time in my life, people weren't comparing me to my brother anymore. They were comparing others to me. That realization stayed with me longer than I expected, not because it satisfied my ego, because it proved something I spent years doubting. There was never anything wrong with me. I was just trapped in an environment where value was measured emotionally instead of realistically. Outside of that environment, everything changed. One night, after a business event, an old industry contact pulled me aside quietly. "I heard your family's in serious trouble," he said. I didn't respond immediately. Then he asked, "Are you going back to help them?" That question followed me all the way home. Because years ago, I would have said yes instantly. I would have sacrificed everything for another chance to finally feel chosen. But that version of me no longer existed. And deep down, I think everyone was finally starting to realize something. The person they treated like second place was the only reason things had worked for as long as they did. At first, I only heard rumors. Clients leaving, employees quitting, late payments. The family business wasn't growing anymore. It was falling apart. And honestly, none of it surprised me, because I had seen the cracks years earlier. The difference was, back then, no one wanted to listen. At first, I tried not to care. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. I had my own company now, my own team, my own future. But every time I heard another update, the same thought came back. This didn't happen suddenly. It happened slowly, one bad decision at a time, and eventually, reality catches up to confidence. Then one evening, my father called me directly. Not a text, not through someone else. Him. "We should talk," he said. That was it, no explanation. But I already knew why. We met a few days later at a small restaurant outside the city. Quiet, neutral. When I walked in, he was already sitting there alone. And for the first time in my life, he looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like someone carrying pressure that had finally become too heavy to hide. I sat down across from him. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he finally said it. "The company's in trouble." Straight to the point. No pretending anymore. No protecting appearances. And somehow, that honesty felt strange. Because growing up, image mattered more than reality in my family. But now reality had become impossible to hide. He explained everything slowly. The expansion failed. Debt increased. Important clients left. Employees stopped trusting management. And my brother couldn't handle the pressure. Not because he was evil. He just wasn't prepared to carry something that heavy. I listened quietly the entire time, not interrupting, not reacting emotionally, because none of this shocked me anymore. I had warned them years ago. They just chose not to hear it. Then my father finally looked at me and said, the thing we both knew was coming. "We need your help." Simple, direct. And for a second, the room felt completely silent. Not because I was angry, because of how long I had waited to hear something like that. Not the request itself, the acknowledgement behind it. For years, I had tried to prove my value to my family, tried to earn trust that was never really available to me. And now, after everything collapsed, they finally saw what had been in front of them the entire time. Ironically, it didn't feel satisfying, just sad. Because by the time people recognize your value after losing it, something is usually already broken beyond repair. My father kept talking, explaining how bad things had become, how they might lose everything if nothing changed soon. Then he said something I never expected to hear from him. "You were always better at this than him." Years ago, hearing those words would have meant everything to me. Back then, I probably would have sacrificed my entire future just to hear my father finally admit it. But now, they just felt late, too late. I looked at him quietly before answering. "You didn't choose the better person," I said. "You chose your favorite person." He lowered his eyes immediately. No defense, no argument, because we both knew it was true. Then he asked the question that mattered most. "So, will you help us?" And for a moment, I thought about the version of me from years earlier, the one who worked late every night, hoping to finally feel accepted, the one who kept fixing problems nobody appreciated, the one who believed effort would eventually matter more than favoritism. That version of me would have said yes instantly. But that person didn't exist anymore. I had already built my own life, my own business, my own future. And for the first time, I understood something clearly. You can love people and still refuse to return to the place that broke you. So I shook my head slowly, not angrily, not emotionally, just honestly. I can't. My father nodded quietly, like part of him already expected the answer. And as I walked away, I realized something strange. For the first time in my life, I no longer felt second to anyone. For a long time, I thought being overlooked meant I wasn't enough, not smart enough, not charismatic enough, not important enough. But I was wrong. The truth is, some families don't choose the best person. They choose the person they're emotionally attached to, and no amount of effort changes that. I spent years trying to earn a place that was never really available to me, and the moment I stopped chasing their approval, my life finally started moving forward. That's the part people don't understand. Sometimes success begins the moment you stop trying to be chosen. So, let me ask you something. If you were in my position, after being treated like second place your entire life, and your family only came back after everything collapsed, what would you do? Don't explain. Just choose one. Comment 1 if you would help your family anyway. Comment 2 if you would walk away and never go back. I want to know what you honestly would have done.